Why, hello there. I'm Sin. We're in the Book Nook, and today we are going to talk about my past, present, and future of books. What I've finished, what I'm in the middle of, and what we're going to get into. All right. So recently I finished the book Vostok, which is the second book in the Lock series. And it's funny, I went and read a lot of the reviews, and a lot of people hated this book. And I'll tell you why. If you go into it and you think it's going to be a book that's mainly about weird cryptids, like how the first book was, the first book, The Lock, had to do with Nessie type cryptids and had a lot of lore about Scotland and the Knights Templar and all that stuff. This book is super weird. All right. So, if you've ever played the video game Subnautica, Vostok is like a book version of Subnautica. I was not prepared for how weird it was going to get, and I loved that about it. I loved how freaking weird and existential and interdimensional. And I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. The premise of Vostok is there's this scientist, Zachary Wallace, and he was the guy who identified and found Nessie. And this is also a kind of a crossover book between Jonas Taylor from the Meg series too was in it. He comes in a little bit later in the book, so it centers more around Zachary Wallace. He's like the main guy in this. There's this lake that's been discovered in Antarctica. It's called Vostok. It's like a subglacial lake, and it's miles down underneath. And to get there, you have to cut through all this ice to get to it. And there's a weird magnetic anomaly down there. Over by this crevice where these scientists were all working, they find that comes up frozen in ice, like these dead bodies of these giant creatures. What they discover is a body of a giant crocodile and then this other huge serpent monster of some sort. Okay. So you're like, well, I mean, it sounds like it's about big, creepy, weird cryptids. Well, it is partially. But then once they get down there to Lake Vostok, miles and miles beneath the ice, and it turns out, yeah, maybe those creatures aren't all dead. Maybe there's some life down there, but then there's all this magnetic anomaly too. What is the anomaly? Maybe there's some weird alien technology down there. Maybe there's aliens down there. Maybe there's stuff about the Greys and the different types of aliens that are in the book, and they talk about the Nordics, the Greys, and there's a few other ones they mention. It's a crazy story. It's a crazy book. If you like really weird off the wall books, if you've ever played Subnautica, if you like books that have to do with paranormal topics that are fictional, then you'll probably like Vostok. But if you think it's just going to be a cryptid horror, well, I understand why people were disappointed, but I loved it. I thought it was great. So that's what I recently finished. All right, so now I'm currently reading the book The City and Its Uncertain Walls by Haruki Murakami. That book is about a girl and a boy who are in love. They're like 16 or 17. They start to have these conversations. The girl brings up that this is her shadow self, and her real self dwells in a town. In that town, if he ever went there, the boy, she wouldn't recognize him. But he could go there because he would be a dream reader. What that entails, I'm starting to learn about, but still it's kind of foggy and not quite clear. And they would be together, but she wouldn't know who he was and wouldn't have any memories of the time they spent together and all this stuff. And one day she disappears from what he considers the real world, and then he goes to find her and finds her in this place. They work in this strange dream library together. There's no books, but there's dreams, and he reads people's dreams, and he had his eyes altered so he could be a dream reader, and they're slowly healing. And the girl, she doesn't know him anymore and doesn't remember him and doesn't have any recollections. And this town is really weird. It's like this, the town honestly seems like the shadow self place, not the real place. And when he came there too, so this is a fantasy book, maybe I should say that. So dreams seem to have a very high significance in it. And when he came to the town, like I said, he had to have this weird alteration of his eyes so he could be a dream reader. And then he also had to have his shadow removed from him because there are not a lot of shadows in this town for some reason. They keep his shadow up by the gatekeeper. There's this weird gatekeeper guy who lets people in, but they never leave. You're not allowed to leave. Once you come there, you're like, okay, I'm here forever. And then there's also unicorns that come into the town, and the gatekeeper lets them in and out, and that's just a strange presence in the town. And the town seems like once upon a time there was a lot of people that lived there. And as our main protagonist like explores the town, like he kind of like wants to see what's there, it feels a lot of it's deserted and abandoned. Like maybe something happened there. It seems like there used to be much more of a community and a society, but it's all a mystery. And it's like this slow unveiling, and it's beautifully written. I've never read anything about this author before. This is my first time. It's almost poetic, and it's really enjoyable to read. You just kind of slip into it, and it's like this dreamlike quality to the prose and words, and I'm really enjoying it so far. That is what I will be reading later tonight. All right, so a couple books that I'm going to get into. I mean, I was just talking about how I like weird books and stuff. It's like cryptids, aliens, and weird stuff. And so this book, obviously it's not cryptids and aliens, but it's called At the Bottom of the Garden by Diane Purkis, and it is a dark history of fairies, hobgoblins, and other troublesome things. So we're gonna get into a book about the Fae and like weird little creatures and such that are maybe in your garden. And this is a nonfiction book. I forget how I found this. I was looking up something on the library site and this popped up instead of what I was looking for, and it wasn't even in the realm of what I was looking for. I think I was looking for some sort of horror book, and this came up, and I was like, that sounds awesome. So I grabbed this on a whim. And well, yeah, I'm interested in stuff like that. So let's tell you a little bit about it. Story time with Sin. At the bottom of the garden is a history of fairies from the ancient world to the present. Steeped in folklore and fantasy, it is a rich and diverse account of the part that fairies and fairy stories have played in culture and society. The pretty pastel world of gauzy winged things who grant wishes and make dreams come true, as brought to you by Disney's fairies flitting across a woodland glade or Tinkerbell's magic wand, is predated by a darker, denser world of gorgons, goblins, and the gallows, the ancient antecedents of Shakespeare's mischievous Puck or J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. As Diana Purkis explains in this engrossing history, ancient fairies were born of fear of the dark, of death, and of other great rites of passage, birth, and sex. To understand the importance of these early fairies to pre-industrial peoples, we need to recover that sense of dread. I always think of like the fairies in that movie Pan's Labyrinth that were like these weird stick creatures. I don't know. That's what I feel like maybe some of them might be. I'm sure there's all different types, but yeah, they don't look like Tinkerbell. And it says, at the bottom of the garden begins with the earliest manifestations of fairies in ancient civilizations of the Mediterranean. The child-killing demons and nymphos of these cultures are the joint ancestors of the medieval fairies of Northern Europe. When fairy figures provided a bridge between the secular and the sacred, fairies abducted babies and virgins, spirited away young men who were seduced by fairy queens, and remained suspended in liminal states. I think this is going to be quite the read, so looking forward to it. At the bottom of the garden, a random discovery at the library by me. All right, also, I loved the show Parks and Rec. So I got the book by Gary Gergich. Jim O'Hare wrote this, and it is called Welcome to Pawnee. And so it's stories of friendship, waffles, and Parks and Rec. And let's tell you a little bit about it. Leslie Nopes. I'm Leslie Norp. Leslie Knope and the Parks and Rec gang charm millions of people with their quirky antics, unfaltering positivity, and complete adoration for the world's best miniature horse, little Sebastian. And O'Hare, who starred as the lovable Jerry, or, well, Gary, Larry, Terry, Barry, depending on the episode, had the good fortune to spend 7 seasons with his pals in this once-in-a-lifetime experience. In Welcome to Pawnee, O'Hare shares personal memories and surprising stories both on camera and off. From hilarious unscripted moments and epic dance-offs in the hair and makeup trailers to iconic parties at Rashida Jones' house and wholesome bonfires in Nick Offerman's backyard. Joined by Chris Pratt, Retta, Rob Lowe, and showrunners Greg Daniels and Mike Schur. Among others, O'Hare reveals how this little show that could became a massive success, despite several cancellation scares, thanks to the tireless dedication and comedic genius of Amy Poehler and the rest of the group. Much like their characters, the cast bonded into a tight-knit family who to this day still talks to one another in a group chat. I love that. Aw, that's cute. Welcome to Pawnee is imbued with the same warmth and humor that endeared Parks and Rec to so many. It's a love letter to a show that has touched generations of fans. And I'm super stoked to read this. I have a few shows that I will rewatch every once in a while. Parks and Rec is one of those. I also love Scrubs. Those are my two, I think, most rewatched shows. Scrubs I've probably seen like 10 times. And Parks and Rec I've watched at least 3. So that means I'm due for a rewatch. And then Twin Peaks. Those are my most rewatched series. So a lot of interesting books on my plate for the beginning of this year. If you like videos where I talk about multiple books that I'm reading or have read, the next video coming up will be about that. So stick around, check it out. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.